Well, good day wherever you may be. This is Craig. We've got Kirk and Scott here. And Scott, I want to venture into the realm that you are an international celebrity, a star of considerable renown with your View from the Couch, a syndicated radio show. What was the biggest story in sports yesterday?
Well, up here in Minnesota, we got our own scandal, but the biggest story was probably Baylor. Nationally, it was Baylor.
Yep. And what happened to Baylor?
You know, obviously I have a sports show, so I know a little bit. There was some sort of sexual scandal, and it was with a player that had previous incidents, and the coach overlooked him previously. Yeah,
in fact, the story is that the coach's name is Art Briles. Extraordinary individual, really. I happen to be a Art Briles fan. Art Briles has probably accomplished more at the collegiate NCAA football level in the last 10 years of anybody alive. He took a absolute destitute program at a podunk school that was a bottom dweller, and he turned it into a national powerhouse.
National title contenders for the past 3-4 years.
Right. Yep. And his name is Art Briles. His son's the offensive coordinator. Very low-key, humble guy. And he was fired at Baylor. I can understand why he was fired at Baylor. And Ken Starr, who is an absolute bastard, one of the worst human beings I've ever met in my life, was demoted, taken from president to he's now a professor over at the law school, mainly because he lawyered up and didn't want to take any personal responsibility. The story is that at Baylor there was a young man, and I'm not I don't claim to have strict recollection here. I'm just going to give you the summary of events, and I could be wrong here. But the gist of the story, as I understand it, back in the time that Gary Patterson was the head football coach at Boise State, they had dismissed a player for undisclosed indiscretions. And he was really a talented player, and so Art Briles asked the kid if he wanted to come to Baylor to play after Briles allegedly asked Patterson whether or not the kid's indiscretion should preclude him from consideration. And Art Briles said that the indiscretion was never made known to him. He gets him to Baylor, and the kid gets into trouble. And it is learned that the young man indiscretion at Boise State was of a sexual nature, that he engaged in inappropriate sexual conduct with a woman. And so Briles dismisses him, doesn't play him. The kid, I don't think, even plays it down for Baylor. And he goes on to rape a girl at Baylor, and he is convicted of that rape. The problem there now is not Art Briles. The problem there is Ken Starr in that administration at Baylor for siding with the football player and against the victim, which is standard operation for that administration. It's a horrid, horrid place. And then the next one was that there was a young man played football for Penn State, for Pedophile U. And by the way, all you Penn State fans out there, Joe Pa absolutely knew. He was part of conversations that discussed Sandusky raping little boys in the football facilities at Penn State. But he brings in a young man from Penn State. I don't know what his motivation was, but he also had an issue, was released from Penn State and was brought into Baylor. He played for Baylor, and he committed a sexual assault on a young woman at Baylor. The university responded very poorly to her, and there was no action taken by Art Briles against the young man. The young man was later convicted of rape. And there's one other outstanding case of an accusation yet unproven of a woman and a football player and a couple of other brawls on the football team. And then the whole series of other issues related to Baylor having nothing to do with the football program. And so he was Art Browse was fired, and Ken Starr, over that administration, was pushed off to the side. You know, can you imagine, though, being the Board of Regents and saying, you know, we're going to fire the guy that made the biggest contribution to this university in the history of the school?
Well, recruited RG3, who brought in, they figure a Heisman is worth $1 billion in college?
Yeah, they think the publicity was worth $500 million is the numbers that I've heard, okay. $500 million. But it turned into you know, a $250 million football stadium just across the Brazos River from the school. And this is really a, you know, I understand that, and I don't know Art Brow's thinking with the second incident, and if he brought in a kid that was known to have a sexual assault, I don't know if he was charged at Penn State. I don't know the nature of that assault, but if he in any way created the opportunity for him to assault a student at Baylor, then you know he needs to bear some responsibility for that. But how does that differ from, say, since this is Ken Starr, you know, he prosecuted and impeached Bill Clinton for having sex with an intern while in the Oval Office, both being paid by the U.S. taxpayer, and he's having sex with an intern. How does what Art Browse did compare to what Bill Clinton did? And by the way, and under oath, Bill Clinton lied about it, which means that he perjured himself, which is a crime. But in business, Kirk, if you had employees in your art school, I don't know if you do or don't, but if you do,
I did once.
Okay, yeah, okay. And if you had sex with one of your subordinates, you better make.
It was sexual harassment. I mean,
man, it is
everything that goes with it. Yeah.
You are in serious trouble.
Okay.
So Bill Clinton actually lied under oath, impeached himself, and had sex with a 21-year-old intern or 22-year-old intern in the Oval Office of the United States, using all the trappings of the federal government to have sex with an intern. And he's exonerated. He keeps his job. And Art Browse, who didn't do anything inappropriate with women, loses his. Now, I understand if Art Browse knew or should have known that one of his football players had acted inappropriately with a young woman, and if he obstructed justice, then it's a crime. He should have been prosecuted. But there's no indication of that. If he should have known, you know, it's not just, you know, the problem with a lot of the sexual indiscretion kinds of things is that he said, she said, who knows what the truth is. Then, you know, shame on him if he should have known, but I have certainly not read anything that indicates that he should have known. But nonetheless, he violated Title IX requirements. Title IX happens to be the single worst bit of legislation I can think of in terms of negatively impacting academia in America and society as a whole. But he ran afoul of Title IX, and he's summarily dismissed. He doesn't even get to stay in court. I mean, no rebuttal.
You don't have an appeal or anything?
Yeah, nothing.
Wow.
He didn't even get to tell his football players goodbye.
Wow.
And Ken Starr gets moved over to the side. Now, the same day, guess what also came out? The head of the Joint Chiefs, during a congressional hearing on whether or not claims of sexual abuse, and there's every day just of women in the military. There's 50 men and women, mostly women, but 50 men and women every day that are abused sexually in the U.S. military by other men and women in the U.S. military. 50 a day. The numbers are staggeringly high, you know, in the tens of thousands each year, with less than 1% prosecuted and convicted in terms of the perpetrators. He was testifying before the Congress and about retaining the jurisprudence related to sexual abuse of women. And by the way, when I'm speaking here about Baylor, there's nothing that I find more disgusting than the abuse of women, if it's unless it's pedophilia. I think pedophilia is the single worst crime that can be committed. Yeah, incest, which is usually involves pedophilia, is right up there at bottom rung of bad. But abusing women, which is the nature of Islam, for example, I put up there as amongst the worst things somebody can do. And not standing up for against those who abuse women is a horrible crime. So if Art Browse knew or had reason to know, and he stood by the perpetrator and did not try to help the victim, shame on him. I'm glad he's gone. But the U.S. military, the same day, it comes out in the news that when the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was testifying before the U.S. military, he says, the reason you ought to let jurisprudence as it relates to sexual abuse of women in the U.S. Armed Forces stay within the chain of command in the military as opposed to go to civil courts. The military is the only place in the country where you're tried in a military court as opposed to a civil court. Whole different set of rules in a military court. Chain of command applies. You don't have the freedom that you have in a civil court. And so he testified, he says, the reason you ought to leave it within the U.S. military is because last year, for example, there were, and I think he listed 175 cases that the civil authorities were unwilling to prosecute, that we in the military saw fit to prosecute. So if you turn it over to civilian prosecutors, there's, for example, 175 victims that would never have had their day in court. And so the congressmen and the senators, upon hearing that, repeated it and said, that's a pretty good argument in favor of leaving it in the military system. Guess what?
Well,
complete fraud.
Mm-hmm.
They knew it to be a fraud at the time. Of those 175, well over 100 of them weren't even cases. There was no claim of sexual harassment. And 100 of them, well over 100 of them, which is when they weren't prosecuted. And of the remaining number, either he just outright lied, they were prosecuted. The civil courts did want to prosecute them, but they were precluded from doing so by the feds, or that the U.S. military did nothing. Every bit of it was a lie, and he knew it to be a lie at the time. And the place in America that a woman is most subject to being sexually abused is the U.S. military. General didn't lose his job. Why is Art Browse gone? Why did Bill Clinton retain his job? Why is Art Browse gone? Why was Ken Starr moved from president of the university to chancellor of the law school? Do you know that it was about 2 weeks ago that a judge in Washington, D.C. ordered all of the Obama administration's Department of Justice lawyers to go back to school and take ethics classes? He says, I'm not kidding. This is an absolute order. I am reprimanding you. You must, as an order from the court, go back to law school and take ethics classes, because you routinely and knowingly lie to this court. That is not acceptable. The man that prosecuted Bill Clinton was head of a university that systematically abused the victims of sexual harassment. And he retained his job full salary. How about them apples?
I tell you, you painted a very ugly picture.
Yeah, there's another story I want to tell, and I understand you have one too that's economics. This one is actually somewhat economic related. There was the story came out because of a farmer that was selling his crops as he would harvest them. He was a small farmer, and he did a deposit anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 each time that he would make a transfer of whatever the crops were that he was harvesting from his field. And a federal judge gave the IRS permission to confiscate his entire bank account, his entire savings. And when he said why, he said there's it's called bracketing, I think. You're guilty of bracketing. But what does that mean? That means that you on a routine basis deposited less than $10,000. And you deposited less than $10,000 fairly routinely. So because of the fact that we think that you may be circumventing the disclosure requirements within banks to disclose, $10,000 withdrawals and deposits, we've got a court order to confiscate your money. We're not returning it. Tens of millions, in fact, hundreds of millions of dollars have been stolen from Americans for that exact reason. You can't deposit your money. It's a crime. You can't withdraw either.
What about part-time businesses like my retirement years now where I routinely deposit $110,000? Are they going to come take it all away?
Yeah, they can.
I mean, my God.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Welcome to America.
God, it makes me sick.
Yep. Do you hear about old Bernie Sanders? He appointed about a third of the delegates to frame the Democratic platform, and he says that Democratic support for Israel is waning, and that the U.S. government needs to start looking into and caring more about the plight of the Palestinian people and the occupation of Jews in Gaza and the West Bank. You know, where would you find a Palestinian? I'm just curious as to...
in a graveyard somewhere near in the Sinai Desert, if you could excavate that deep.
You'd have to go back. I mean, we have really old bones. The last Palestinian was killed 2,500 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is not even any indication they were hauled off into slavery.
They had no language now.
No, there's not a single building, not a single written record, not a single statement by anybody anywhere in the world about the Philistines other than in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. That's the only place they're even mentioned there. And apart from there, they are completely unknown to history. There's not a single relic from them. And
I don't think you can save the Palestinians till you can find them.
Yeah, the Assyrians finished them.
Okay.
Yeah, finished them. Nothing left of them. And they weren't the target of anything. They just happened to be in the way, and they were in the way between the battles between the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Egyptians. Matter of fact, when Alexander the Great went through there about 300 BCE. He battled some people. I mean, he was really ruthless with the Phoenicians, particularly with Tyre and places like that, because they just didn't surrender to him. But on his way down through Egypt, through the area that we now know as Gaza, he got involved in a couple of skirmishes, but it was with Egyptians, because most of the time it was an Egyptian outpost area.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a string of them all the way up.
Yeah, but you imagine old Bernie Sanders. You know, he's a communist, secular humanist. They just hate Jews, don't they?
Yeah, he's fantastic too. Anyways, so I have a question for you. I asked UNIQ this one time. Mm-hmm. What happens if Israel puts down their weapons and says, we're not fighting anymore, we're done, do whatever?
They're wiped out.
Oh, in fact, what we're going to do is we're going to withdraw back to the 1967 borders. We're not only going to, which we've already done on the west side, but we're going to do the same thing on the east side. We're going to withdraw to the 1967 borders. And we're going to be a de-armed zone here, and we're going to put down all of our weapons and withdraw to 1967 borders. You know what would happen?
What happens if that happens? I know what happens.
Well, yeah, it'd probably be anywhere from 1 week to 1 year, and there wouldn't be a Jew left in Israel, and the entire nation would be completely destroyed. That's what would happen.
Okay, now let's flip that around. What happens if all the countries around them decide, hey, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. Let's, we're all putting down our arms.
Oh, and we look at the amount of land we have. I mean, the last thing we need is land carved out of the smallest, by far, state in the region. We've got all the Sinai, which is just sitting here idle. We've got, 99% of Saudi Arabia's got no one living in it. Majority of Jordan's got nobody living in it. Syria's been depopulated. We got a whole country there that we could go to because they're fleeing there. Why don't we just move into one of those other countries and let's just all focus on doing the right thing. We're just not going to be terrorists anymore.
I'm sure Israel starts pushing on the offensive, huh? The expanded borders. I mean, that's got to be it, right?
To support this two-state solution and reward terrorists, Islamic terrorists, with a country that they will do the same thing to they've done to Gaza is insane. I mean, you have to be morally bankrupt, which tells you a lot about the leftists in this country.
I can tell you right now that most of the politicians are morally bankrupt in this country.
They are. Yes.
You heard that the Huffington Post called out for the Christian pastors of America to recognize Muhammad as a prophet.
Oh, great! Yeah, the Huffington Post is one time I actually used them as a news feed, and I've just completely disassociated everything from them because everything that I read from them editorially is insane. Yeah, and of course that's insane. What does the Quran say about Muhammad being a prophet?
He wasn't.
Yes, Quran says he was not a prophet.
He was not a prophet.
What does the written record that we have from the Hadith and the Quran in terms of prophecy from Muhammad? Is there a single accurate prophecy that Muhammad made?
None.
None. Okay. So the evidence from the evidence, that's right. Paul made one prediction; he got it wrong. And Muhammad made hundreds of predictions. None of the Quran. The Quran just says, "I'm flat out. I am not a prophet." But in the Hadith, Muhammad does make a number of predictions. They are all absolutely laughable. The one that I based my book on is called Prophet of Doom. Muhammad predicted that 500 years after his demise, there'd be the day of judgment when the world would come to an end. That was, it was 632 CE. So So that would have been in the 12th century. Didn't happen, did it?
No.
No. So that's why I called him Prophet of Doom. Is because all he did is recommend the day of doom, and he did bring doom on the world. So for the Huffington Post to say that's what Christian pastors ought to do is to say, A, that they have no idea what the word prophet means, what the test of a prophet is, or that Muhammad was absolutely, unequivocally declared not a prophet in the Quran itself.
Well done.
Maybe they're just spelling prophet wrong. Maybe it's the P-R-O-F-I-T.
Yes, but for him to P-R-O-F-I-T, and I have a chapter in Prophet of Doom called War Made a Prophet, and P-R-O-F-I-T. That was the Battle of Badr. That was the first official act in the Islamic era was the Battle of Badr. There was no battle. It was armed robbery. Yeah, and the Quran itself in the 8th surah specifically says it was armed robbery. That Muhammad went there for a singular purpose, and that was to rob the civilian caravan. It was an act of murder, of torture, of kidnapping, of selling a kidnapped victim via ransom, of stealing, and of armed robbery. That's how Islam was created. It's the first official act in the Islamic era. It's called the Battle of Badr. Read the 8th surah. It's all laid out there for you. So Islam definitely made a prophet. Muhammad inspired 75 terrorist raids in the first 10 years of the Islamic era, with Badr being the first of them. Badr means of the full moon. And he kept 20% of what his jihadists stole, and they got to keep 80% of what they stole. That's how Islam spread.
My favorite thing now is where they tell me everything that the Islam has given to the world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Rape, systematic rape, kidnapping, mass murder, jihad, religious endorsement for terrorism, abject poverty, mistreatment of women. Yeah, they've given a lot of things to the world.
Where are the factories in the Muslim world that produce everything? There aren't any.
Well, the only places where there are factories in the Islamic world, labor is so cheap and women are treated so poorly. There are sweatshops in Bangladesh to sew goods. Prior to Erdogan taking Turkey back to fundamentalist Islam, Turkey had a period of time where it was a fairly secular country under the military rule, and during that time, there's a number of Western companies that built assembly plants in Turkey.
Yeah.
And there are some menial jobs making shoes and and clothing, apparel, that sort of thing in Indonesia.
Mm-hmm. But that's
and by the way, none of those
not great factories. I think it could build a Coca-Cola machine, making machines.
Oh no, and none of those things are technical products. None of them are designed in the Islamic world. None of the factories were built by an Islamic country.
No, the
company. Yeah.
Replace them. This is not a sophisticated society. I don't know why everybody acts like, if you didn't supply them with the guns and the training, they couldn't do anything. That's throw off at one another.
Which is really the point. If you want to stop the spread of Islamic terrorism, you want to stop the atrocities that are taking place in Syria, all you need to do is to isolate Islam, stop buying the oil, and stop selling them weapons. Do you hear that Putin told the Islamic world in a big summit that you have a reliable friend in Russia?
Oh, I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's pretty disgusting. So here he is. He's getting all the flack because he's bombing Sunni Islamic terrorists on behalf of Shia Islamic terrorists, and so he wants to endear himself with Sunni Islamic terrorists by saying, "You've got a friend in Russia. You've got a friend, count on me." Now, you said you had a conversation with somebody that was up in the hierarchy of General Electric that had reason to, in advance of the 2008 housing banking crisis, predict the economic downturn?
Well, they do study. Large corporations do studies, and this is from a friend of mine who was really high up, and he told me what their biggest concerns were, and when they did this study. And last week when we were chatting about some economic things, it kind of led to it all kind of put a lot of the pieces together when I remembered what he had said to me. And they did a study, and you being in business large scale will appreciate this. They estimated that our population obviously was not growing.
Right.
The only growth that we had
is
immigration, and that was generally starter-level jobs, because when you come over here, say, from Mexico or something, you're probably not the right out of college type of crowd.
Yeah. Although I would tell you that having lived in Southern California, the Hispanics that, and I would agree that a lot of them had menial laborers.
Right.
But the number of Hispanics that I employed that owned their own business, that were very capable businessmen, was very high. And the vast majority of them were honorable, hard-working, very capable individuals. But anyway,
I'm not talking about the ethics of their work ethic and everything. It's harder to hit the ground running when you
don't speak the language.
Give up everything and move to a foreign country.
Right, and don't speak the language.
Don't speak the language.
Okay, so when we return, we're going to hear about the GE forecast on economic downturn. We'll be back. All right, welcome back to Observations. Kirk, you were saying that GE conducted a study, funded a study, and they said that because of the fact there was no population growth amongst rank and file Americans, so those who would have grown up here, spoke the language, had the benefit of the U.S. education. I don't know if that's a benefit, but nonetheless, educated here, having been raised here, knowing the culture here, that part of the population was not growing, actually declining slightly, and that the only part of the growth was via
immigration. Immigration. We had no growth. I mean,
yeah, and so they were forecasting that trend would ultimately have the same kind of consequence that it had here in Japan.
Well, when you fact, yeah, pretty much, and because they were already experiencing that manufacturers were selling their product to distributors, and then thus the distributors selling it to the retail stores. We're talking about things like refrigerators and stoves and so forth, and they were already having to offer them 90 to 120 months, 20 days dating, just to keep from having to lay off workers.
Okay.
So they're extending, and then, of course, the retailer is giving all kind of cashback, this, that, and the other, in order to move the product out of the store. But you can't move product out of the store if people are not buying homes and setting up families.
Right.
And, of course, that came into the conversation that you and I had and Scott had a while back about when you come out of college and you, number one, you may not be trained for anything, but let's assume you got trained for something. You come out of college with $100,000 in debt. That's the money that you would have used to buy a home, or you can't get a loan. How do you get a loan when you owe $100,000 and you have a menial job or less than adequate?
Yeah, really. Yeah, I mean, there are far too many people going to college on student loans. No question about that. And there's, of course, Bernie just wants to forgive them.
Yeah,
that's a lot of people supporting you. If you say that what you borrowed you don't have to pay back.
Hey, you can make friends if you get stuff away.
Yeah, because voting yourself money is always a great idea, right?
Oh yeah. It's a really healthy choice, really moral choice. But clearly that is a problem. But part of the problem too is that college used to be a place that you would go, and if you didn't learn, you at least were schooled in the art of learning. You were told how to use a library, to research, and then to use statistical analysis or debate tactics, rhetoric, to be able to exercise good judgment regarding what you were learning, and then how to come to reasoned conclusions and make decisions based upon those conclusions. It was an environment where you were taught how to learn. And that was replaced. It was replaced by political correctness, where right and wrong no longer matters, where being judgmental and discerning and discriminating are actually considered a crime, where lies are promoted as is good because they're politically correct.
And the one thing that you mentioned that I think is a big component of that is the debate. People have forgotten how to debate one another.
Yeah.
They've forgotten that, look, we don't have to agree on everything, but we should be able to talk. And then once we both relay our information, we should be able to come to a pretty good idea of what we're talking about.
If you were to tell somebody that's the ad hominem argument, they'd have no idea what you're talking about. You said that's a non sequitur. They would have no idea what you're talking about. You said that's a red herring. Clueless as to what you are talking about in terms of debate parlance. They have no concept, because what they call debate now is really just a television show where hosts try to set themselves up to promote themselves by going on to make statements rather than questions, and then the politician talks about whatever it is that's of interest to them, but no accountability.
It's childish arguments. It's a lot of and
almost all of it's ad hominem against the individual, as opposed to against the argument itself. The evidence and reason. I debated in college. I took 3 different things that I did forensically in school that I enjoyed. One was debate. The other was extemporaneous speaking, and also impromptu. my favorite of those was extemporaneous speaking, where you had I've forgotten the amount of time, but it's something like 5 to 10 minutes to on a subject that you were given. You had 5 to 10 minutes to research it, put together your thoughts, and compose a 5-minute oral presentation extemporaneously based upon the evidence. I found that to be the most intriguing. But I enjoy debate because I enjoy the rules of debate, but we don't teach them. So we're graduating people that are ill-prepared. And the other problem is we talked about Title IX. And with Title IX, we have now got a 65% of those going to and graduating from college are women. So it's gone from an environment which was 65% men to 65% women. Well, biologically, women are the source of childbirth and of child nurturing in those early years. And biologically, men were designed to go out and to bring home provisions for the family. And listen, I have got no issue with women working. I think it's a great thing. And I've got no issue with men taking a very active role in raising their children. I think that's a wonderful thing. But we have engineered society in reverse. And you've got a bunch of young men out there now that are improperly trained, that are ill-equipped to do anything other than a menial job. And you've got women either unwilling to play the most important role in the world, which is to bring a child into the world and to nurture that child in their early years. You've got them unwilling and or unable to do this with their careers competing for their time and no one investing in their marriage because they're both off working. So we have an issue with that as well. But it's interesting. So the GE just looked at demographically. There's not enough people buying new homes, and the economy in America was growing only because of the fact that we were growing as a nation, and so we needed new homes. Mm-hmm. And so homes were the principal driver, and therefore they were building new homes. You know, part of the problem too is that the federal government, way back, this goes back 75 years, enacted legislation going back into the time of FDR Eisenhower era. We enacted legislation whereby it was deemed that home ownership would get people to buy into the system, and that they could be more easily controlled if they had skin in the game, if they were vested in the system. And the best way to get people vested in the system was home ownership. That guaranteed you knew where to find them, that they would spend money in the economy, that they would pay taxes, all of that sort of thing. Oh, yeah. That they would, that they would send their kids to the indoctrination factory that we call schools. And so they wanted them to own homes so that the feds created the means for them to own a home with zero down, where they would not be qualified, and where the interest rates would allow them to buy homes way above what they could afford because of the adjustable rate mortgages where they went in artificially low. But in 5 years, when the rates went to the normalized rate, they would not be able to afford them. And so we promoted zero down, thinking that equity would grow because the value of the house would be inflated as more and more people came into the market, and they created a house of cards. It's like fiat money, and they destroyed all credibility and responsibility and morality in the housing market, and it still hasn't recovered.
And if you're in the business and servicing area, servicing those people, then you're totally at their mercy.
Correct.
On how that economy goes. So
yeah, what's so amazing too is, of course, the big Academy
food chain and
the big Academy Award winners for pictures. You got the one that's Mad Money or whatever it's called, and that's got George Clooney in it, yeah. And then prior to that, you had the one that was done on the housing market, the best, that had a who's who of Hollywood, yeah, and at The Big Short, and it's presented as if it were fact that it was the bankers who got colluded, that the bankers colluded and decided we're going to create this big fraud because we'll make a fortune on it. Not the case.
No, it's government.
No. In fact, it was Clinton that came up with the idea that banks could sell derivatives.
Is that the Clinton that his wife wants to put in charge?
Yeah. That's the one. Yeah, that people could. It was the Clinton idea to sell derivatives, and the derivatives were they bundled a bunch of loans together, and they sold the bundle of loans so that they could, because by getting them off their books, they could go and loan more money. And so they wanted to get them off their books. And so the Clinton administration was the one that came up with the idea that you can sell these derivatives. And of course, the administration on both sides of the aisle came up with Freddie Mae and Fannie Mac that said, let's create an environment where people can no longer have to put down 20%, that they can put down nothing for a house, zero, get 100% financing.
They can get 105 at one time.
Right, and then this was the federal government that approved variable rate loans, which there was a 0% possibility that a variable rate loan was going to lead to anything other than economic collapse. It had to. You could be a child with no economic experience, education whatsoever, and if you just tell somebody, I'm going to artificially lower the rate of the loan for the first 5 years, so that it's the artificial lower rate is compensated at an artificially higher rate that you're locked into thereafter. That if anybody buys something at the artificially low rate, when it becomes the artificially high rate to recoup the losses, that they're not going to be able to pay it.
No. Well, the game was, of course, to sell it in the first 5 years, and hopefully inflation drove up here, so you.
Yeah, they wanted you to do that because you pay taxes on the profit if you sold it.
Yeah.
And then you turn that into another home as you continue to drive this artificial economy.
But I did it all wrong. I put money down and paid it off.
Yeah. And they're, and according to Bernie Sanders, it's the one percenters that created the mess. Yeah, it's the one percenters. It's them dastardly bankers that created the mess. Yeah. Now, it's not to say that bankers are all good. They're not. But, it reminds me of what Donald Trump didn't say. His first interview after becoming the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party. He was asked, first question, so how is it that after facing the deepest and best Republican pool of challengers ever, 17 highly qualified individuals that were, many of whom were senators, you as a political neophyte, as someone who has never run for political office, as a businessman, were able to trounce all of them and emerge victorious? He didn't have the answer. I know the answer. Let me share the answer with you. The best in America, in fact, my guess is the best of almost any civilization throughout history. And by best, I mean the most capable, the smartest, the wisest, the most dedicated, the hardest working, the most imaginative and inventive, typically the most moral, because to build something you have to be moral. The best throughout history have not taught for a living. The best throughout history have not entered religion and become preachers or pastors or priests for a living. The best have not joined the military. In fact, the military puts its recruiting facilities in the place where people are most prone to fail. The best absolutely and unequivocally do not engage in politics. The best are not in the media criticizing other people's actions. The best, the most capable, the hardest working, the most inventive people, the most successful people, far and away, not only in America, but throughout the history of humankind, are in business. It's always been that way. So a decent businessman will always trounce the best politician.
Well, they get it.
Yeah.
You know how it all works.
Made a payroll. You know, if it were me, I wouldn't allow you to vote unless you were making a contribution to the country. Either own something, or you built something, or you ran something, or you were part of something. You have to make a contribution. You have to be a net contributor, or you don't get to vote. And number two, you can't run for office unless you've been in business, unless you've managed a payroll, made a payroll. Know what it's like to start with an idea and then promote it, sell it, get it off the ground. Because if you don't, who are you kidding? You know, when Yahowah went through his whole list, Kirk and Scott, of if you choose government, if you choose a ruler, this is what he's going to do to you. Mm-hmm. You notice that there were only two things on the list. That two things were shared over and over again. One is he's going to create a military. He's going to take your sons to create a military, and the reason for the military is that will keep you from being able to overthrow it. Right. And number two, he's going to rob you. Yeah, he's going to take, and he's got to give all the list of the way he's going to take from you. Going to take this, going to take that, going to take the best of your productivity. And what he's going to do with what he takes is he's going to first reward those who are his henchmen, his officers, his generals, his cohorts. And then he's going to cause the rest of the population to become dependent, his subjects, essentially his slaves. Right. So Yahowah was really quite straightforward about it. He says that governments, rather than being productive, he didn't say that the government is going to engage in agriculture and going to create vast amount of food for the people. He didn't say that the government was going to engage in education and instruct the people. He says no, the government's going to engage in robbing the people, and then establish a military to keep the people from ever being able to keep what they have earned.
I'm not even sure most people realize when you say something like the government doesn't make money, that they look at you like, really?
Yeah. The government doesn't. The government is not a
taxes. If you cut off your taxes,
right?
They don't have anything.
Yeah, the government does not make money. Does not build the economy. The government is a parasite. Right. Right. It takes away from productive people. It causes productive people to be less productive. It restricts them, and then it takes their assets. Right. So the government is a net parasite. Right. On productivity, and because of fiat money and the nature of governments and this dependency culture that we've created through governments, which Yahowah predicted in Shamuel, they are not able to steal enough from productive individuals to fund their dependency, indulgence, entitlement society. So now what they do is they create the illusion of money. Right. Which is much easier to do now that we're on computer systems. Yeah. It's. I think cash represents a tiny percentage of 1% currency. It's a tiny percentage, less than a tiny part of 1% of the overall capital, which is why they're so regulatory. That's why they steal.
You take out $10.
Right. They'll confiscate all of your money if you take out your money. Yeah, and even if you try to say, I want to leave the country, they confiscate half of what they haven't already stolen. And then if you want to go to another country, the reason the United States, with its empire, has total control over you, even if you were to go to Costa Rica, even if you were to go to Chile, even if you were to go to New Zealand or Australia, is because those countries buy American weapons. Right. Those American weapons don't work without American parts, without American technology to keep them working. And those governments don't stay in power without the military.
It's interesting. They also set up central banks in all these countries we take over. I'm sure it's what happened in Vietnam now. They've opened up the Vietnam thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the few places that doesn't have a central bank.
Yeah. And, of course, what's the first thing that Obama did when he was there? Oh, we're going to sell you weapons now.
Yeah.
We engaged in a war there on a lie.
They'll handle financing. They'll handle everything.
Sure. Absolutely.
It's so plain when Yahowah says it, and people are so dumb when they look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. What God said is, if you choose government, it's going to rob your productivity, and it's going to use that to do two things: to create a dependency culture where the people are essentially slaves and servants of the government, and to create a military that keeps people from rebelling, and that they'll deploy. As soon as they create a military, they're going to deploy it. And he says it over and over and over again. There's 12 points, and the 12 points make 2 points. And what do we witness in the world today?
Exactly that.
Right.
I mean, verbatim.
Perpetual state of war and the entitlement state. When you even try to rein back entitlements slightly, it's called austerity. You know, where Britain right now is on the cusp of, within a matter of weeks now, is going to vote on whether or not to exit the EU. And, you know, really, it doesn't make any difference if they exit or not.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it doesn't make any difference is the EU is a wholly failed enterprise. And the EU is going to collapse. And it's going to collapse with Britain or without Britain. The timing of its collapse is Britain will make no difference. But the EU is essentially a dictatorial form of government. The individual citizen has absolutely, has no influence whatsoever on what is imposed on their country. And it is a system that is absolutely destined to fail. It's going to accumulate power and wealth until it collapses, and it will collapse. So it really doesn't matter how the people of Great Britain vote. The only thing that bothers me is when the world tells them that, you know, you need to do this because you're going to go to the back of the line in terms of trade. And what's so stunning is that it's as if the federal government determines trade. You know, I was involved in a lot of trade. I had a manufacturing facilities all over China and all over Mexico, and sold goods all over America, and had plants also, manufacturing facilities in America and distribution facilities in America. And it was one time where I was overseeing, on an annual basis, about 5,000 40-foot containers of goods. And you know how many times I had the federal government engage to assist, even just assist, to participate in trade?
I doubt they helped you at all.
Zero. We paid our duties, and that was it. Zero. Not once. Not ever. You know, this notion that Great Britain will go to the rear of the bus if they exit the UK, that's what Obama threatened.
Yeah.
There isn't any trade other than military hardware that's orchestrated by the government. You know, if they want to, and for the most part, what they can buy from America is food. Because, even though it's American companies, like Apple's an American company, don't make anything in America.
Mm-mm. No, they moved out a while ago.
Right. Dell's an American company. Don't make their products in America.
We deserve our fate.
We absolutely do. And no one deserves it more than the Christian. That's why the Huffington Post telling Christians they ought to collectively declare that Muhammad was a prophet. And what did Muhammad say about the Christian Esau, which of course is corrupted to Jesus? Esau, of course, is the individual God says that He hates. because he went over and married Ishmael's daughter, and therefore associated, took someone who should have been part of the covenant, and went over there to Islam. It's what Yahowah's point of view is the exact opposite. And what does the Quran say? The Quran says that the Christian Esau in the Arabic wrongly changed to Jesus.
That's where they came from.
No reference to Passover whatsoever. And he said he was merely a man, wholly a man, and that he was from Allah. So if you're going to be a Christian and say he was a prophet, Muhammad was a prophet, then his presentation of Isa is 100% inverse. As a matter of fact, the Quran actually says that you ought not make friends with Christians. They're the enemy. And that anybody that associates with Christians or makes friends with Christians becomes an apostate and becomes like them and must be killed.
Well, Iraq, they killed almost a million.
Yeah, so I would think it makes perfect sense if you're a Christian to announce that Muhammad was a prophet because he told Muslims to kill you.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Welcome to the world of the insane, and she owns a newspaper.
It exactly is that. I mean, every day it gets more and more insane. It drives me crazy. I mean, I'm not throwing things at the TV because I have to replace it.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm just going, how can you become this stupid?
Yeah, I can't watch it anymore.
No?
I just don't. I don't watch it anymore. I have chosen other forms of. One of the advantages, Kirk, of not doing the Shattering Myth show. I mean, other than I miss my daily yabber with Scott during the breaks. But the fact of the matter is that I was at one time when I was doing that show, I was reading 12 to 15 newspapers a day.
Yeah.
And I'd become a news junkie. I read article after article. I posted the articles I wanted to talk about and tried to come up with connections and understanding and insights on those articles. And it was like wallowing in the manure of humankind every day. And now, I'll click an article or two, I'll skim it, and, like I have one up right now. There's a mass rape video on out of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, where they're taking the Olympics here in a couple of months. And these hundreds of men, I guess, participated in this. But 30 or some odd on camera. They were so proud of raping this little girl. They filmed themselves doing it and then posted it. Now, can you imagine being a parent and saying, I want my child going to Rio?
I'm stunned.
Can you imagine being somebody of between 18 and 20 or 30 years old, and which are most of the Olympians, and saying that I want to go there and subject myself, man or woman, to the Zika virus. Because if you're a man, you're going to give it to your wife. It's sexually transmitted, not only by mosquitoes, but also sexually transmitted. And we're going to run the risk of having a brain-damaged child. But, I am so into my own ego and my own athleticism that I'm going to, for glory and of a gold medal, I am going to risk the health of my unborn child and my wife or husband, and I'm going to go there to Rio to compete in those games.
It's time for it to be over.
Well, it seems really selfish when you say it like that.
Oh, goodness. Well, we didn't get to Habakkuk, but maybe by design, because we'll pick up with Habakkuk 2:5 this evening on Yahowah Radio.